Thank you for joining us for today's town hall. I'm Andrew Schiff, CEO here at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Today, we're going to be talking about school meals, school lunch and school breakfast, and their role in protecting children from hunger. In Rhode Island, no child should go hungry and no child needs to. Every public school in Rhode Island participates in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs. The cost of school meals is paid by the federal government and by parents. In response to the pandemic, Congress waived all fees charged to parents for school meals and used federal funds to cover the cost. That meant that school lunch and school breakfast were free for all students. Unfortunately, that federal program ended last year in June. And that is just terrible timing. As all of you know, food prices have spiked and high food inflation is placing more children at risk of hunger. In Rhode Island, 41% of households with children report that they cannot afford adequate food. It's time for the state to do more to end child hunger. And we can ensure that students get the food they need at school by using state funds to restore free meals for all. Today, we have 3 expert guest speakers who will be able to explain why healthy school meals for all is so important and so effective. You're going to be hearing from Alexis Bylander, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at the National Organization FRAC, the Food Research and Action Center. We also have with us today Jessica Petrolia, the coordinator of child nutrition programs at RIDE, the Rhode Island Department of Education. And you'll also be hearing from Karen Weatherall, co-director of the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition. We're going to save time for questions from the audience. And if at any time you have a question, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Click on it, type in your question, and we'll make sure to save time to answer your questions. Healthy school meals for all is a big deal. And to make it happen, it's going to take advocacy and leadership. And I'm thrilled that today we have with us 2 of the biggest champions for healthy school meals for all in Rhode Island, Senator Sandra Cano and Representative Justine Caldwell. Both have bills that they've introduced that will have us be able to return to free meals for all in September. Senator Cano is chair of the Senate Committee on Education. Welcome, Senator Cano. It's all about education and learning, right?
That's right, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me today and for making this important information session available for all. As the chair of the Education Committee, it is a pleasure to be with you all today to talk about the importance of not having any children in the school hungry. No child, like you said, who's in the school should ever be hungry, nor should any child who's hungry be shamed for family circumstances out of their control. The free and reduced lunch program has been a godsend to so many children and families, like you said. But its model is outdated and needs to be changed to adapt to changing times. More and more families are finding themselves struggling with daily finances while the economy continues to go in uncertain and concerning directions. Due to our country's current economic climate, more of our children will be going to school hungry, and simply put, This cannot happen. To the schools and need to be safe havens for our children, and this includes being a safe haven for hunger. In order to protect our children for hunger, while also protecting them for bullying and being easing the financial burden for many families, Representative Justin Cowell and myself have introduced legislation to make school lunches free for every child. This will ensure that no children will go hungry throughout the day. It also will ensure that children will not be bullied for being poor or for getting free getting free lunch. It will help the growing number of families who are rightfully concerned about the rising cost of everything and the shrinking numbers in their food bank accounts, and monthly without the stress of an empty belly or the worry of where their next meal will come from. This bill will allow our students to focus on their learning so as they should be. I thank you all for the support for this important piece of legislation. Together, let's keep the momentum and get this bill passed so that no child in our schools ever goes hungry again. And thank you so much for your advocacy. I'm here to fight with you until the end.
Thank you, Senator. Now I want to welcome Representative Caldwell. Representative Caldwell is the Deputy Majority Leader in the House. Representative Caldwell, tell us about your bill.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you and the senator. And really, you guys do this hard work every day, and it's so appreciated. So it's such a pleasure and an honor to work with all of you. So the bill we have in the House that we're working on in the Senate with Senator Cano really opens up both access and improves the quality of our school meals. I have two young kids of my own. They are 8 and 11, so they are in 2nd grade and 5th grade. So I see on a day-to-day basis the school menus that we get from school. I also see how hungry kids are and how long they are away from home. So, my son gets on the bus at 8:15 in the morning and he gets home at 4:15. And that's just a normal day. That's not a day with basketball. That's not a day with, anything else. He's away from school for 8 hours, away from home for 8 hours. Kids need to eat many times during 8 hours. When kids go to school and they are expected to learn, they're expected to sit and soak up new information and ask questions and be well behaved. As an adult, I need to eat several times in 8 hours in order to do all of those things. And every single one of our children needs to do that too. And, when we think about, I try to be a realist, some of the pushback we get on universal meals, right? Well, why some people can afford it, they should pay X, Y, and Z, right? But I don't think if you don't have kids in school, how the whole process is working. So a couple of months ago, I got an email from my daughter's school lunch thing saying that we were $100 in debt. And I emailed her teacher and said, I send Lulu to school with lunch every day. Is she getting lunch? Like, what is happening here? And her teacher said, oh yeah, she eats the lunch you send her as a snack. And then she orders lunch every day. And I said, oh, okay, well, good to know. And if she's hungry, she should do that. And, I paid that bill. That was a surprise to me, but not every family could do that, right? Like you get into a situation where your kid is hungry and eating, and that could have meant less food on the table or less gas in the car, for a lot of other families. And we need to make sure that kids are going to school, they're treated equally. We don't charge, people to use the bus. We don't charge them for textbooks. Now we can't charge for field trips. And yet for some reason, we've decided that we're going to put food, which is an essential, part of life for all of us, in a different category. And I'm just so pleased by how much support this bill has. We hear from leadership that they're concerned about money. So my plea to just all of you is to be writing letters to your editors, to be writing to your reps and senators about how this is the year. We know how this works. We had a case study the last 2 years. So this is a perfect opportunity to continue on to it. So I just thank you for your continued advocacy. And I'll be here at the end to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Caldwell. That's wonderful. Now I want to turn to our guest speakers, starting with Alexis Bylander from FRAC, to give some background on healthy school meals for all. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, it is so great to be here. Thanks, Andrew. Well, great. We can go ahead to my first slide. And I am excited to be at today's town hall because free healthy school meals for all is something that I'm really passionate about. So if we move to the next slide, I will just echo what Andrew said in that when we say free healthy school meals for all, healthy school meals for all meals for all of that, those phrases, what we're talking about is providing free breakfast and lunch to all students, regardless of their household income. Next. Now, Representative Caldwell and Senator Cano have already talked about some of the benefits of doing this, and I'm sure that every one of you here today can think about how this could improve the school day. But here are some of the benefits that the Food Research and Action Center likes to reference. The first is that it would ensure all students are hunger-free and ready to learn. It would reduce any stigma currently associated with participating in the school meal program. It would end the problem of unpaid school meal debt, which right now is a significant problem for many families and school districts across the country. It would ease administrative burdens for schools. It would support innovative service models like breakfast in the classroom. And it would advance racial equity by ensuring that, in particular, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students had the nutritional support that they needed to get the most out of their school day and be successful. Next. So although there is so much momentum and excitement around this issue right now, it is not new. Dr. Janet Poppendieck wrote a book about the history of school nutrition in the US, which is excellent, Free for All, Fixing School Food in America. And in the book, she talks about how there have been calls for free school meals since at least the 1940s, which is something that I think is very validating, and that this has been noted as a good idea for decades now, and also heartbreaking that it has taken us so long to really start to see more action around this issue. Next. And in some schools, we already do have free school meals for all. In 2010, as part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, something called the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, was established. And this allowed the nation's highest poverty schools and districts to serve free breakfast and lunch. So instead of collecting the traditional meal application, those schools are reimbursed using a formula based on the percentage of students' categorical eligibility for free meals based on their participation in SNAP, TANF, and in some states, Medicaid. So currently over 16 million children attend community eligibility schools. And in those schools, we can see the benefits of everybody eating for free. Now, some people may ask, well, isn't this enough? The fact that the high poverty schools and districts have the option to serve meals to all students at no cost. But the issue here is, and why it isn't enough, is that there are students and families who are struggling, that need free meals, that do not currently qualify for them in pretty much every school district in America. And it's not just the nation's highest poverty schools that need this. Really, we need it everywhere. Next. As has been noted, the pandemic changed the landscape of pretty much everything, but certainly school food. COVID-19 highlighted the critical role that school meals play for children, and ensuring that children had continued access to school meals was a core component of our country's pandemic response. Free school meals for all students during a little over 2 school years really served as a trial run for what a nationwide free school meals policy could look like. Next. About a year ago, FRAC had the opportunity to do some nationwide public support polling, and we found that approximately 63% of voters nationwide support legislation that would make free school meals permanently available to all students. Since we did our polling, some other state campaigns have done their own state-specific polling and have found numbers at around this level or higher, particularly higher when the polling was done just of parents. I'm sure that many of you have seen over the last couple of years the steady stream of support for this issue in the media and calls for action. I included just a couple of my favorite headlines here: free school meals when the Fed step back, states step up, school meals should remain free for all children today and always, and then stakeholders like the Washington superintendent calling on the legislature to provide free school meals to all students. But I could have pages and pages of the headlines around this topic over the last couple of years. So there are really three pathways to accomplishing free school meals for all. There would be federal legislation that would create a nationwide policy, and FRAC, where I work, is incredibly supportive of that. Then there's the option of state legislation, which is each state passing their own policy one at a time. And then there's the incremental expansion of existing programs at the state or federal level, like the expansion of the community eligibility provision, which I referenced earlier, until we got to universal meals for all students. This is a map that I think is really the highlight of these slides and something I love sharing, and this conveys the momentum that's happening across the country. So let me take a minute to explain the color coding here. So you may know that California and Maine were the first states to pass a free healthy school meals for all policy, and those policies are already being implemented in this current school year. Colorado and Minnesota were the next to pass policies, and they'll go into effect for next school year. Nevada chose to continue to offer free school meals after the meals that were available during the pandemic for both this school year and for next school year. And then Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut have committed to providing free meals to all students for this current school year. And then all the states in green, Rhode Island included, are places where there are bills introduced in the legislature and/or active campaigns to make this a reality. Next. So I will say I had the opportunity to be at the Governor Walz's bill signing for free school meals for all in Minnesota just last week. If you can see a little patch of my forehead in the very back row there, but Minnesota was the latest state to do this, and the energy and passion in that room when he signed that bill was so incredible. And I think there are going to be many states to follow. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the next state I think that we will be posting to the map is New Mexico. Their free school meals for all bill has made it through the legislature and is ready to be signed by the governor. Next. So now let's talk about the federal level for a little bit here, because so earlier this year, recently, the Biden administration hosted a White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. And after that event, they put out a national strategy document. And in this lengthy document, there was a reference to advancing a pathway to free, healthy school meals for all. And it was good to see that included. If you go to the next slide, I'll talk about just a couple other things happening at the federal level. And also note that for a nationwide free, healthy school meals for all policy, that would require an act of Congress. Currently, Representative Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey, is calling for free school meals for all to be included in the fiscal year 24 appropriations bill. In the past, Representative Omar and Senator Sanders have introduced standalone school meals for all legislation and have plans to reintroduce those bills. So there are different things happening in different moments of opportunity, but definitely a lot of room for more action on the federal level. And that is something that FRAC will be focusing on in the months ahead. Next. We have our website, Free School Meals for All, that has a bunch of resources, the map, which we keep updated, and then also a PDF of all the free school meals for all bills that have passed or are introduced in state legislatures right now. Next slide. I just wanted to share this quote that was from a Colorado food service employee when free meals were available during the pandemic. And they noted, "It's been incredibly personally healing to see how universal meals have really equalized school meals and allowed all students to access them without stigma. I would watch a whole class come down for breakfast together or a whole class line up for lunch. And it literally brought me to tears to see how universal meals changed the culture of school meals." Next. So in summary, if there's just three things that I could convey from my section here, it would be that free school meals for all students is the future of school nutrition. It would support good nutrition and academic achievement for all. States are leading the way, highlighting the public support, the benefits to students, and how implementation can be done. And a nationwide free school meals policy in the long term is needed so that all children, regardless of where they live, have access to the nutrition they need to learn and thrive. Thank you so much for having me today, and I'll turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you, Alexis, for that background and the national perspective and that awesome map. We want to be on that map. And the only way that's going to happen is by the efforts in the General Assembly. You heard from Senator Cano, Representative Caldwell, other legislators are supporting this effort, including Representative Tanzi. We see that there is a lot of momentum in Rhode Island, and we want to keep that up. So now, to help us understand the situation in Rhode Island, I want to welcome Jessica Petrolia from RIDE.
Thanks, Andrew, and thank you to everybody else in the food bank staff and our legislators and everyone who was able to make this conversation possible today. Like Andrew said, now that Alexis has given us a great national and federal perspective on healthy school meals for all policies, I'm here today to provide you with a little bit more background on how our school meals programs have been operating within the state over the last few years, the impact of the loss of the federal flexibilities related to the pandemic, and what implementing a healthy school meals for all policy could look like for us. So I want to start with a little bit of a timeline. Currently, all public schools in Rhode Island offer breakfast and lunch under the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs, but not all students are able to meaningfully access these meals because their families may not be able to afford it. More than ever before, the pandemic highlighted the crucial daily supports that our school meals provide to children and youth across the country on a daily basis, including access to healthy and appealing meals. From March of 2020 through the end of the 21-22 school year, for the first time ever, the federal government offered flexibilities that allowed schools to offer breakfast and lunch to all students at no charge with no paperwork required. At the beginning of the pandemic, meals were served primarily in grab-and-go bags or boxes for families to take home and consume at a later time. But during the 21-22 school year, most students returned to in-person learning, and this gave us the first opportunity to see what a school meals program offering free meals as part of the regular school day might look like. Unfortunately, these federal flexibilities ended at the start of the current school year, and unlike some of our neighboring states, Rhode Island did not have a local policy in place that would allow schools to continue to offer meals at no cost. This means that students once again faced a tiered system in the cafeteria in which they're offered services differently based on a factor that's completely out of their control, their family's household income. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in the last few years, we've gotten the opportunity to see what offering free meals looks like as part of the regular school day. While there are still many families that can and will choose to provide lunch under this type of policy, it offers the opportunity for many more students who may have otherwise fallen through the cracks to benefit from the increased nutrition security that school meals can provide. During the 21-22 school year, when meals were offered at no cost to all students, about 55% of the state's enrolled students were participating in school lunch on a daily basis. This school year, the number of participating students has declined by over 14,000 lunches per day. That's over 2.5 million lunches over the course of a 180-day school year. Next slide. So where 55% of our overall student enrollment were participating in school lunch on a daily basis when meals were offered at no cost as part of the school day, as of November of the current school year, only 46% of our overall student enrollment were participating in lunch on a daily basis. And what's worse about this is our school's meals participation has not only declined from the level seen when meals were offered at no cost to all during the pandemic, but we've also seen a decline in participation as compared to pre-pandemic. And this decline is primarily driven by students that do still qualify for free meals. So that means as of today, we have fewer students who qualify for free meals choosing to access them than we did pre-pandemic. When we shifted this year from a scenario that created a level playing field and equal access in the cafeteria to a system that separates our students and creates disparity based on income, the stigma of these programs as being meant to serve only the poor families returned. And this resulted in a drop of participation among students qualifying for free meals by over 6% from pre-pandemic levels. While it can be easy to assume that if a family doesn't qualify for meals, that the need for such a support doesn't exist, we know that this isn't the reality for the families in our state. There are many reasons that a family may not apply for school meals, such as concerns over immigration status, and many more reasons why a family that has applied for school meal benefits may not qualify. Keep in mind that under the eligibility guidelines for the upcoming school year, which are set by the federal government, in a family of 4 with 2 parents working full-time, each parent would have to make less than $9.38 per hour in order to qualify for free meals. These income guidelines are the same nationwide, regardless of cost of living or any other local factors, and are based solely on gross income. Knowing this, it's not hard to imagine the number of families in all communities throughout our state who may be struggling but don't qualify for the vital support that free school meals provide. failure to qualify for free meals is not the same as being able to afford school meals. For an elementary student, the average cost of school lunch is about $15 per week. When families are unable to pay for the meals that their children are eating at school, unpaid meal debt becomes a stressor for both families and schools. You'll hear more on this topic shortly, but when school meal debt becomes uncollectible, a school district must write it off as bad debt and find non-federal sources to cover the loss. While the funding sources may vary, most commonly this funding comes from the school's general fund, making unpaid meal debt a burden both financially and administratively for schools, not to mention the stress and anxiety that it causes for students and their families. So how would this actually work? The proposed legislation around healthy school meals for all relies on maximizing federal dollars by accessing existing programs that allow us to claim the most number of meals at the highest federal reimbursement rate. The state covers the difference then only between the free reimbursement rate, which you can see is currently at $3.93 per lunch, and the paid rate, which is currently 37 cents per lunch, for any meals that don't qualify as free. So this makes the state contribution $3.56 per non-qualifying lunch and $2.17 per non-qualifying breakfast. In order to maximize the federal contributions, schools would be required to participate in available programs that, in the opinion of RIDE, would result in the highest amount of federal reimbursement. For schools that qualify, this would mean participating in the community eligibility provision, which Alexis touched on in her presentation, and this is commonly referred to as CEP. Many schools in the state did not qualify to participate in CEP under current program rules. However, the USDA has proposed regulation that just was released yesterday, actually, that if it's enacted, will allow Rhode Island to further maximize federal dollars by expanding eligibility for CEP to more schools. For those schools that don't qualify for participation in CEP, the collection of meal benefit applications would still be required. Regardless of whether this legislation is passed or not, RIDE is committed to continuing the work that we started last year to help families with the process of applying for meal benefits. A statewide campaign, which includes the support of school, community partners, and government agencies, will be important to minimize the financial burden on the state. And lastly, I just want to touch on what this investment really means for the future of our programs. The graphic on the screen was designed by partner organizations in Vermont to demonstrate how the investment into school meals serves to improve the program in a sustainable way by increasing quality, boosting participation and revenue, and allowing for reinvestment into the program to even further enhance the quality. Many people have concerns about school meals, whether it's about the appeal, the cultural relevance, or the general quality of the meals. What we do know is that regardless of these concerns, participation in school meals is proven to have positive outcomes on student health and academic success. Still, we know that we can do better for our students, but it's hard to make that leap when the funding structure of the school meals program hasn't seen any significant changes since the program's inception in 1946. By investing in healthy school meals for all, we would be giving our programs the funding boost needed to make meaningful changes, like offering higher quality local food items and producing more scratch cook items. The type of legislation the type of language that's highlighted on this slide and included in the currently proposed legislation around healthy school meals for all is what turns a good bill into an excellent bill. This will ensure that with the passage of healthy school meals for all, we can meaningfully improve program quality while also investing in the Rhode Island food system and supporting local farmers and businesses by prioritizing local foods. And that concludes my presentation today. I'm happy to answer any questions. You have my contact information on the slides, and I'll also be here at the end for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. You know, everything that you said was really important, but there's no question that when you show the drop in participation from last year when all meals were free to this year when we've gone back to the old tiered system, that just proves the point. Healthy school meals for all is really effective. Now I'm happy to introduce Karen Wetherell, who is from the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd just like to start by thanking Representative Caldwell and Senator Cano for their leadership with this Rhode Island campaign, and also Alexis and the FRAC team for their commitment to ending hunger in America. The research and resources that they've developed to advocate for healthy school meals for all policies have really been helpful for our efforts here in Rhode Island. Jessica did a great job sharing the data of Rhode Island meals participation before, during, and now after the federal free meals program ended, and explaining the nuts and bolts of how a universal free program would work and be funded in Rhode Island. And in working with Jessica and her team at Ride Child Nutrition, I can tell you that they are totally invested in improving both access to school meals and the quality of those meals served with innovative ideas and collaborative approaches. Now, I'm just going to share some things we've learned over the past 2 years in our work supporting school districts. In my role with the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition, I'm an active member of district wellness committees across the state. So I have regular contact with central admin staff, principals, teachers, nurses, parent and student leaders, and food service professionals who all serve on these committees. The school meals program, what's served, the length of time to eat, student engagement, farm to school, supply chain and staffing issues, these topics have always been discussed. But the announcement at the end of last school year that the federal free meals program was ending left many districts concerned, anxious, and scrambling. Next slide, please. The universal free program was a huge success and running quite well here in Rhode Island. More kids were eating and ready to learn. There was far less administrative burden and no meal debt. So it was going to be a challenge to get the word out to families that after 2 years of equal access to school meals, money would need to be put on student accounts or a meal benefit application completed and approved for all kids to continue to eat at school. In fact, Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition partnered with RIDE to create a school meals outreach toolkit, which included communication strategies, flyers, social media, and robocall templates, and a recorded tutorial video available in both English and Spanish to assist families in completing the application. But despite these outreach efforts, the return to the old tiered payment system for school meals has been difficult. Next slide, please. Post-pandemic, more families are struggling financially with the food inflation that Andrew described, housing and energy costs, and yet they can't qualify for free or reduced price meals. There also are families who could be eligible, but for reasons of shame, fear, confusion, or just being overwhelmed by the whole process, they don't complete an application. So when kids without money or a qualified application go through the lunch line and receive a meal, they get charged and accrue debt. Some families have resorted to putting do not serve notes on their children's accounts to prevent charges from accruing. And sometimes students refuse their tray of food when they realize there's no money on account and a bill would be sent home. I've heard all of these stories and have been told in many districts that unpaid meal debt is now out of control, the worst it's ever been, and steadily increasing. Next slide, please. When student meal charges become uncollectible, a school district must write it off as bad debt and find non-federal sources to cover the loss, as Jessica said. And most of the time, this comes from the general fund. That's the money that's for educational purposes that we rely on for staffing positions, new curriculum, etc. And while some districts have tried using so-called like angel funds, like GoFundMe, they just aren't sustainable and often actually lead to more debt and stigma in the long run. But most districts practice debt collection first, with letters and emails to families with minimal charges, and then often with personal calls from school staff or administrators as debt increases. I've had administrators talk of the discomfort of being made into bill collectors when they really need to be partners with parents in a child's education. Ultimately, all of this leads to a tremendous amount of stigma and misguided practices without addressing the systemic issue. No child should have to prove they are worthy of nutritious food. Next slide. The availability of nutritious, appealing, and culturally appropriate foods is paramount for a high-quality school meals program. These programs operate independently of their school districts as self-sustaining enterprises and are on tight budgets. Food service directors juggle many challenges with procurement, staffing, cafeteria and kitchen space, and equipment needs. a source of steady funding through federal and state reimbursements with a Healthy School Meals for All policy would allow these programs to invest in more local purchasing, updated and sufficient cafeteria serving lines, equipment, and staff training for more scratch cooking, and maybe even higher wages to attract more qualified staff. Finally, when kids are hungry, they're not able to concentrate and are often irritable. We actually filmed a breakfast grab and go program video at a high school where one student remarked, "I actually don't like people unless I have food in my stomach in the morning." So that's not a great way to start a day of learning. School nurses in both elementary and secondary schools reported fewer visits for headaches and stomach aches when meals were free for all. And breakfast participation in particular suffers when meals aren't free, as it's often only the free and reduced price poor who eat. Next slide. So Healthy School Meals for All can really be a game changer. The campaign for Healthy School Meals for All in Rhode Island has generated much interest and support. We have a list of 40 and growing community organizations who've already signed on to a letter asking the General Assembly leadership to fund this program in the 2024 budget. If you represent an organization that would like to learn more and join the coalition, you can reach out to me or add your name and email to the chat and someone will follow up with you. Next slide. And as individuals, anyone can support the campaign by sending an email to your legislators using partner American Heart Association's digital advocacy platform, where only your name and address is needed to email a pre-written note. So thanks to the Rhode Island Community Food Bank for their continued advocacy and for hosting this webinar today.
Thank you, Karen. After listening to you and to Jessica and Alexis, I hope that all of our audience members are ready to take action to make Healthy School Meals for All a reality in Rhode Island. Schools do not charge students for their textbooks based on household income. Schools do not charge students for visits to the school nurse. And schools should not charge students to eat. We need you to contact your state representative, state senator, and let them know how important this issue is to you. Karen gave you the American Heart Association way of contacting your state representative and state senator. You can also go on our Advocate for Change page on rifoodbank.org. And we will also show you how to get in touch with them. Call them, email, let them know this issue is important to you. Now let's take questions from the audience. I want to introduce the Food Bank's Chief Philanthropy Officer, Lisa Roth-Blackman, who has been watching the Q&A box and monitoring the questions that everybody has been asking. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. We do have a few questions, so let me jump right in. The first is a question, or a two-part question, about how this would be funded here in Rhode Island. And if it passes this year, will we need to continue to advocate for the following years to get it in the budget every year, or what's the long-term plan? So maybe, Andrew, I'll start with you and you can loop in.
So what we're advocating for is for state funds to be used to fill the gap so that there are no charges to parents. And we are also advocating for the federal funds that are available to be maximized, that we have to make sure that we're using all the federal funds available at the same time. But I welcome Senator Cano, Representative Caldwell, to tell us how this will be paid for.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew. So yes, it will become, the bill calls for it to become a line item in our budget, and it does call for it to be appropriated each year. So if this bill were to pass, hopefully, and get enacted, that means that we would not have to come back every year and advocate for free breakfast and lunch.
This is a question that maybe Jessica or maybe Karen, because you referenced a toolkit, and there's a question about whether there's a toolkit in particular in Spanish for agencies, and I think meaning our member agencies who are food pantries and meal sites who can promote the school lunch program to increase participation. So what can folks do who are serving families already in need?
Oh, I see Karen coming off.
Yep.
Karen, you want to start? Go first.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. I just actually put, I think you're going to get it. It's going to the host. Did you see that link that I put in? Okay.
Yep.
So, and Lisa will put it into the chat. We did create, as I said, this tutorial, which is recorded, a video. It's done in English and Spanish, and it actually has a voiceover in Spanish as well as having the text. That's a step-by-step on how to complete the application, which can be very helpful. It's for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's quite intimidating. So I think that the staff at any agency would be able to help, or to sit down with someone, Spanish speaking, who would be much more comfortable completing it with this tutorial.
And then I'll just add to that Karen's resource that she shared is just specific to the meal benefit application process, which is certainly important to be able to access meals. But if there's interest in additional nutrition education materials or materials about what's actually included in a school lunch, what that may look like, we do have those available in English and Spanish as well. So anyone who's interested in that kind of material can reach out to me.
Great, thank you. We have a question about charter schools. So maybe Jessica, I'll stay on you for a moment. How does this work for charter schools? Do the kids at those schools receive the free meals?
The legislation that's currently proposed includes all public students. And so all of our charter schools in Rhode Island are public charters, so they would be included.
Okay. And I'm going to jump back to the cost. There's a follow-up on the cost to the state. Is there an estimate for the budget for next year?
I can answer that if you want.
Great.
So we should have that in the upcoming days. Whenever we introduce a bill that is going to have a fiscal impact on the budget, we get fiscal notes from the budget office. I was supposed to have it earlier this week, but the one we received had some errors in it. So actually, thankfully, they sent it back to the budget office, and I hope to receive it today. And I will follow up immediately with the coalition members and everyone as soon as we have that.
Great. And I believe there's a question about, does it apply to free breakfast and lunch? And I believe it does, but you're shaking your head. Yes. Okay, great. Does somebody have the bill numbers? Maybe one of my team can track down the bill numbers and drop them into the chat for folks.
I can help you with that. In the Senate, Senate Bill 68, and I think Rep. Cotwell has the House number.
Okay. I'm just catching up. There's a lot of questions in the chat. Bear with me for a sec. Well, this is one I think we can put some information in the chat from the food bank. Are there any links or other resources with statistics that would help educate on how many families in Rhode Island are considered food insecure? So yes, we do have lots of data on that in our status report on hunger, and we'll drop that into the chat. And if we can, Kate, post again the link that people can use to email. There's a question about just reposting that so folks can capture it. All right, let's see. So there's a question about nutrition. Can someone give a high-level summary of how nutrition oversight works for these programs and how individual medical dietary needs are handled? So Karen, I'm not sure, maybe you're the best person to start with that one.
I think maybe Jessica, do you want to handle this?
Okay.
Sure. I mean, as far as nutrition in the school meals is concerned, these are federally funded programs. And so each meal has a specific meal pattern. So those are the requirements, the food components that have to be offered, the nutritional standards of each of those components. And oversight of that is done through my office at RIDE. So we go out and actually look at food labels, we look at menus, we watch a meal service. The regulations do require, because again, this is a federally funded program, that we make reasonable modification for any persons with a disability. So that includes any of those medical concerns that might exist, and those are handled at the local level by each individual school. So each school should have a coordinator that would help handle that process.
And can I just jump in with one further thing? In talking about the nutrition standards, people might be interested in knowing that the USA right now has proposed updates to the nutrition standards for the school meals program and looking for comment. So anyone can provide comment. It is focused on things like added sugars, which I know a lot of people have concerns about, and flavored milk, sodium, and whole grains. So I will give you this link, Lisa, where people can provide comment if they're interested in that.
Great, thank you. And let me give a quick thank you to Rep. Tansey, who shared her version of the bill, which hopefully people can see now, but we'll share it if not. And then there's a detailed question, I think for you, Jessica, from somebody who works under Title I, and their funding is tied to the percentage of families that qualify for free and reduced lunch. How will Title I funding be determined by RIDE without these statistics? I have no doubt there's a solution because other states are doing it, but they want to make sure they don't lose funding.
Sure. So there are actually two funding concerns that we hear tied to this. One is for state education aid, which right now there's work being done in the legislature and in the budget specifically to move state education aid away from being tied to free meal benefit applications. On the title side, there's actually a long, lengthy guidance document that's put out by the U.S. Department of Ed about the alternate measures of poverty that can be used or measures that can be used in conjunction with meal benefit applications for schools that participate in CEP. So I'm happy, I'll look that up and I can share that in the chat for you.
Great, thank you. We have a question about whether volunteers can help families who are overwhelmed with the application process to complete the necessary paperwork for the program while we wait for hopefully the legislation to pass that would give all kids free meals. Jessica, is that best for you? I'm not sure who should answer that one.
I can start and Karin may have something to add. So the meal benefit application process is handled at the local level. So each individual school or district manages their own meal benefit applications. Many of them have coordinators that specifically are there to help families. We are also working on a statewide campaign for this, but I'm sure that at the local level, volunteers would be welcome, particularly at open house events and back to school events. Getting involved with the school wellness committee is a really great way to kind of put your hands in that world and see what help might be needed.
Great.
And I'll just follow up on that with plans, and especially if the Healthy Meals for All policy were to pass, we really would be looking at working with community organizations that have trusted relationships. I think that some of it is, as Jessica said, up to the local education authorities. But oftentimes, either the hours when parents would need to access this information, schools aren't open, they aren't necessarily trusted. There's fear about providing personal information, what is absolutely necessary to provide, whether it's their reading comprehension or language skills, whatnot. It doesn't, as I said, it is very intimidating. So we would really want to work with organizations that are in communities that already have developed relationships. So particularly if this passes and in this base year, I mean, I agree, at any point we want anyone to complete these applications. But if the policy were to pass in that first base year, when we would determine the federal funding to come in, hopefully we can work with many more partners right in the community.
Great. There's a question about how can Healthy School Meals for All support our local food economy, and Rep. Caldwell or Senator Cano, I wonder if you can jump in. I believe there are some details about trying to purchase locally in the bills, but maybe you can speak to it.
Sure. Senator, do you want to speak, or I can start? Yeah, so there is a big part of the bill is also about food quality. So, you know, it asks folks to prepare scratch meals when possible, and also to every extent possible to serve locally grown or produced food. And so we know that that will contribute to our economy because we'll be buying more local food, which is great. And that's what we want to see. I know at my kids' schools, they grow a lot of food there, which is good. And I know at some of the like food taste test events they have at the schools. They did one recently at my son's, and they served a locally made salad dressing. And now you cannot find it in any store around here because it was so popular with all of the kids. Every time I go to Dave's, it is still sold out. So I think the bill really asks people to do that. And, obviously we hope that they'll follow suit.
And just to add into what Rev Caswell was saying, I think part of what the intention of the bill is to make sure that not only our students get the most healthy options for a meal, but also I think that would transfer back to their families and their culture in their local households. Because what we've been doing is trying to make sure that across the state we have a holistic approach where not only the students are taken care with healthy families, but also like the families that are able to get access to, for example, SNAP programs, that they are able to also choose healthy products. And then so like that will help the economy, just like Rep. Cowell was saying, because we are supporting the local grown farmers. So it's just kind of a holistic approach that we're trying to do with these bills.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question about, this is a broad sort of messaging question about what the potential benefits and challenges of implementing a statewide free meal program in schools and how can they be effectively communicated. So I wonder, I might call on Rep. Caldwell or Senator Cano again, just to sort of speak a little bit to what you perceive as the challenges and messaging that we all can be prepared with to address that.
Yeah, I can pipe in again. A lot of the challenges I hear mostly are about the money. Most people are for this if they feel like it is a priority to put in the budget, which is obviously our job to make sure they feel that's a priority. I think, as Andrew mentioned, as I said, the fact that we did this for the last 2 years really undoes a lot of those challenges that we saw and how we would implement it, right? We've already done it. We don't get that opportunity a lot with legislation to say, hey, we did this already, so we know it's going to work. I will say the one message I've been using with folks is the message I got from the teachers and students that many of us on this panel and attending this have heard, which is that, put yourself in a position of a teacher and you have a hungry kid who has a do not give a lunch on this account, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to say, okay, well, I guess go sit down with your peers and not eat when you're hungry? No, like we're going to give them a lunch, right? And then the school districts are paying for it. And so that is the message that I have been using to kind of counteract this. Like we're putting our teachers who are already struggling in a terrible situation, right? And, what would you do if you were in that situation? Would you give that child a meal? Or would you tell them to go sit down and wait till they got home and see what they might have there? So that's the messaging that I've been using with folks that I found effective. But I think the most effective message is we already did it. So we know how to implement it. It's been done. We did it for 2 years and it was great. Why roll it back at all? Connecticut and Massachusetts have continued to do it. We know it will work.
Great. There's a question about, are there marketing materials, particularly in Spanish, to address immigrant fears and concerns and increase participation? Who's volunteering for that one? I could think of a lot of you that might be able to speak to that well.
I'll start on that one and just say that the meal benefit application video that Karin referenced on the Rhode Island Healthy Schools Coalition website, that's the number one fear we get about immigration status is the need to complete that meal benefit application because it does ask for the last 4 digits of a social or a checkbox. And so there's very clear language within that video about how the information is used and that it doesn't move from an LEA. Once they collect it, it stays there. It's never reported up to a federal agency. And that, again, video is available in English and Spanish, but we can certainly look to building out additional resources as well.
And can I add to that? I think it's important to just go to the trusted community-based organizations that serve the undocumented immigrant communities, because like that, I think that they will gain that trust, and it's more about information and taking away that stigma and also that fear that families do have because the form asks for that social security number. So I think it's an opportunity for us to collaborate on that.
If I could, can I just add to Representative Caldwell's comment earlier?
Please.
Yeah.
There's some part of this issue that I can just talk about so straightforward and factually, and then there's some parts that I just get, like so fired up about. And what she just referenced about how if you are the person there that sees a hungry child, like, are you going to let them, just be like that for the rest of the day? And in some situations, districts are picking up the tab on that. But I'd like to go even farther and say, in some situations, individual school nutrition staff members are paying out of their pockets for those kids, or teachers are paying for those meals. And I find that to be just, heartbreaking and cruel on multiple levels. And are those really the people that should be picking up these tabs when we, could do something so much more overreaching and systematic? So just wanted to add that thought.
Thank you. There's a question about, do we have numbers for total meal debt and administrative costs related to the school meal programs? Jessica or Karen, I'm not sure if there is rolled up data or if individual districts have that data for their own communities.
Yeah, we don't collect data in aggregate on meal debt, so that belongs in the individual communities. And as in regards to administrative costs, if you're talking specifically about the costs related to like trying to collect on that debt, that again is at the local level. I would just stress that it's not just about the cost of trying to collect on meal debt, but the impact that it has when you put educators in the position of acting as debt collectors for these students that they're trying to service and build trust with.
Thank you. And I'm going to wrap it up with this question to you, Andrew, just to answer this one and then summarize a little bit. What is the current state or data of food insecurity among school-age children in Rhode Island?
So we've seen the rate of food insecurity go way up during the pandemic, and a lot of it had to do with the economic disruption from the pandemic, followed by the increase in food costs. And really important federal programs help to mitigate the hardships that low-income families were facing, but slowly those programs have ended. They've terminated, including the federal program that provided free school meals for all. And all we're saying is that we should use the lessons from the pandemic to improve the way we provide food in schools and make sure that children have the food that they need where they live, learn, and play. So I thank you, Lisa. I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you to our guest speakers. Thank you to Senator Cano, Representative Caldwell, to Alexis, Jessica, Karen. This has been terrific and really helpful. We've recorded this session and we'll be able to have it up on our website. And you can help us by advocating for healthy school meals for all. Advocate on your own, but also tell your neighbors. We need everybody on this issue so that we can get it through this legislative session, and that way begin the school year in September with the best program possible for our children. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.